Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you for tuning in. Today we'll be exploring the world of economics and politics as we check out a video titled The Reality of Socialism in Denmark. A few weeks ago I posted a video, or I think a month ago, I posted a video comparing the tax systems in Denmark and US. And there were a lot of controversies in the comment section whether Denmark is a socialist economy or a capitalist economy. And when I stumbled on this video, I thought it wise to share my reactions with you guys and my thoughts with you. So let's check out this video, guys. Feels like we're about to watch a movie. The soundtracks and all. Are Scandinavian countries really socialist? We'll find out soon.
Hello and welcome. I'm Mary O'Grady, America's columnist with the Wall Street Journal. In this video, we explore the Scandinavian country of Denmark. It is often incorrectly characterized as socialist by those promoting socialism for the world. As we'll see, the reality of Denmark, both currently and historically, is very different than the popular perception.
Going back to at least the 1880s, all the way up to roughly the 1970s, Denmark's history is of limited government, free trade, and reliance on entrepreneurs and markets. As a result, the Danes enjoyed great prosperity. Consider that by the early 20th century, Denmark enjoyed one of the highest levels of per person income in all of Europe. And Denmark's economic success was so great during the 20th century that by 1970, its per person income, which is a measure of living standards, had not only caught that of Britain, but it surpassed it. And the success of Denmark was not limited to just income. By the middle of the 20th century, Danes enjoyed one of the highest life expectancies in the world. They also had one of the lowest infant mortality rates in the world.
Wow.
So how do we explain the incredible historical success of a relatively small Northern European country?
A key part of this success was Denmark's long-standing commitment to limited government and their focus on trade, entrepreneurship, and investment as drivers of economic growth. On the eve of its experiment with much larger government, starting in the early 1970s, Denmark had one of the smallest governments in the industrialized world.
Denmark prospered because for the longest time, it relied on entrepreneurs, businesses, workers, and investors, rather than government as the driver of economic growth. So what happened?
Starting in the early 1970s to the mid-1990s, Denmark experimented with a much larger government and introduced a large welfare state. Government spending in Denmark soared from around 42% of the economy in 1970 to almost 60% by 1995. By the mid-1990s, Denmark had a much larger government than most other industrialized countries. At 59% of its economy, Denmark's government was larger than those of Canada, the United Kingdom, the United States, and Australia, and it was above the average of wealthy industrialized countries, which in 1995 was about 43%. Like its neighboring Scandinavian countries, Denmark's politicians, bureaucrats, and special interests regulated and often even controlled larger and larger shares of the economy. This meant that they, rather than entrepreneurs, investors, business owners, and workers, were increasingly making economic decisions.
So how did the Danish economy respond to increased government spending, heavier regulation, and higher taxes?
The Danish economy struggled. Unemployment remained stubbornly high throughout the 1980s and 90s, and it reached almost 11% in 1993. And inflation soared to double digits starting in the 1970s and continued through much of the 1980s. Simply put, Denmark was in a crisis.
Facing the crisis, what did the Danish...
I'm curious to know more about what led to the introduction of larger government in Denmark in the 1970s. Was it a response to a specific social or economic issue, or was it a more ideological shift? I want to know, guys. Let me know in the comments. Because they were doing very well with a small government, why the introduction of a larger government all of a sudden? You guys, let me know in the comments, okay?
Government do?
Starting in the mid-1990s, the Danish government reduced government spending as a share of the economy, falling from a high of almost 60% to 50% by 2019. The reductions in government spending helped Denmark get its government finances in order, Denmark balanced its
Okay,
budget
way to
and
go.
began reducing government debt as a share of the economy. And the Danish people supported limits on deficits and debt so that the country's finances would be more sustainable.
A different way to think about and assess Denmark's economy is the Fraser Institute's global measurement of economic freedom.
If we look at data for 2021, this is the latest year for which we have available data. It shows that Denmark was considered a mostly free country. It ranked 7th out of 165 countries worldwide. But a more nuanced story emerges when we examine the 5 subcomponents of economic freedom. Denmark scores poorly on one of them, the size of government. It's ranked 143 out of 165 countries on that component. But when it comes to the other areas of economic freedom, Denmark is among the freest countries in the world.
But isn't it true that Denmark still maintains one of the largest welfare states among industrialized countries? And that this spending explains the poor ranking of Denmark in the Economic Freedom Index?
Despite its spending reforms, yes, Denmark still maintains a relatively large welfare state, and this explains its comparatively larger government. Denmark still has one of the highest rates of social spending of any industrialized country.
All of this spending has to be financed by taxes because, as we've already seen, Denmark avoids borrowing.
Yes, government spending in Denmark is paid for through higher taxes. But, contrary to popular opinion, that burden is primarily borne by the average Dane. Denmark's sales tax is the second highest in the industrialized world at 25%, and is one of 2 main sources used to finance higher government.
You know, I find it interesting that the Danish government has a strong aversion to borrowing, whereas my beloved country, Nigeria, seems to have a different approach to debt. It's almost as if we have a culture of borrowing, which can be very problematic in the long run. Nigeria has a history of accumulating debt, and I think this just highlights the different priorities and values of our 2 countries, and it's something we could learn from. Perhaps Nigeria could take a page out of Denmark's book and focus more on living within our means. Wow, this is really impressive. They have a strong aversion to borrowing. I'm impressed. Nigeria is so used to borrowing. Like, we literally borrow to finance our budget. And it's really embarrassing, honestly.
Spending. The other tax used to finance Denmark's large government spending is the personal income tax. Unlike countries like Canada, the United States, Australia, and the United Kingdom, where personal income tax rates are steeply progressive, Denmark's high personal income taxes are levied on the middle class. Denmark's high top personal income tax rate, for instance, kicks in at a fairly low level of income. This means that many ordinary Danes pay the top tax rate of a little over 57%. For context, let's look at the US dollar equivalent of where the top personal income tax rate starts for different countries. Denmark's kicks in at about 91,500 US dollars, and in the US, it's well over $500,000. At the same time, Danes understand the importance of attracting investment and entrepreneurs by maintaining a competitive business environment, particularly with respect to business taxes. Denmark continues to maintain one of the lowest business taxes in the industrialized world.
So the Danish model for financing much higher levels of government spending is straightforward. Ordinary Danes pay one of the highest sales taxes in the industrialized world. Many also pay the top personal income tax rate. This means that average Danes pay dearly for higher government spending. It's a mistake to characterize Denmark as a socialist or even democratic socialist country.
Honestly,
Denmark is
they are
one of
pure
the most
capitalist
economically
economy.
free countries on the planet. In many ways, it's more market-oriented than other Western countries, including Canada, the US, Australia, and the United Kingdom. While Denmark once experimented with higher levels of government spending, it learned that these policies don't work. It retreated by reining in government spending. Denmark does have a larger welfare state than many other Western countries, but it pays for this system with higher taxes levied on average Danes. It's an arrangement large.
And I think they're happy paying these taxes because they get value for their money. Unlike Nigeria, we don't really have a strong policy concerning taxes, though some people pay, but then they don't even get value for whatever monies they pay. And that's why our country rely on borrowing, because we are not so big on tax issues, on payment of tax. We are not so big on it. And even the few people that pay, they don't get value on it, because what do you expect? Not a lot of people pay these taxes. And so the government rely on borrowing to be able to finance her budget. So yeah, I guess that's how it goes.
Actually rejected in most other Western countries.
Wow. Wow. It's interesting to see that Denmark is considered a mostly free country, ranking 7th out of 165 countries. But it's also surprising to see that it scores poorly on the size of government components. Wow, this was really an interesting watch. Now we can say for a fact, without a doubt, that Denmark is a capitalist economy, because the economy rely more on entrepreneurship and businesses. Wow, this was interesting. My country, Nigeria, is a mixed economy because we have a significant public sector that is solely run by the government, like the areas of oil and gas, electricity. Those are public sectors that are run by the government. And then we have a lot of private sectors that are also running their businesses on their own freely. So yeah, Nigeria is a mixed economy, and sometimes it's referred to as developmental state model. Yeah, and that's because the government plays certain roles in some public sectors, but at the same time it encourages investment and the growth of private sectors. So yeah, but this video, I was really impressed when I learned that the Danish government dislikes borrowing. Like, I can't relate. In my country, Nigeria, it's almost as if we have a culture of borrowing. Most times the government rely on borrowing to even finance our budgets, and it's so sad, but that's what it is. Basically, I enjoyed watching this video. It gave me more insights on whether Denmark is a socialist or capitalist economy. And for those that were having some arguments in the comments on one of my previous videos on Denmark, I hope this video throws more light on that topic and you're clear now. Thank you guys for watching. Until next time, bye.